Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. We're gonna dive in. For everyone who's joined the past few minutes, we will be recording this webinar and we will send you the slides and the recording afterwards. For the agenda today, we're very excited to introduce the programs team. Then we will be going over some electric vehicle charging basics, and then we're excited to introduce our community charge program, which will help you to bring EV charging stations to your community. And we're also very excited to have E3 joining us today. We have Kevin and Peter. They are one of our selected vendors for the vendor-owned and operated model, and you will be hearing from them very shortly. Then we will quickly go over getting started, how to contact us, and then dive into Q&A. Here on the slide, you can see the Community Charge Program team. On the top, you have the Power Options team, which is myself, Fair Gillette, and Walter Gray. And then our partners on the bottom, we have Joe Delarose and Emily Jones from LISC, Massachusetts, and Anna van der Speck from Green Energy Consumers. And what are the different roles within Community Charge? So for those of you that are not familiar with Power Options is a nonprofit based out of Boston, and we reduce the cost, carbon, complexity of energy for nonprofits and public entities in the Northeast. Our office is located out of Boston, but we are representing Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. We have different programs varying from building decarbonization, energy procurement, solar and battery storage, fleet planning, and EV charging installation, which we're going to talk about today. At Power Options, we are helping our members to basically get access to low-cost equipment and also make the process simpler for them. So what we do for all our programs and what we did specifically for our EV charging program is that we did run a competitive RFP process to select different vendors for EV charger installations. This was a very exciting process, and we get to see kind of what is out there, what are the vendors currently doing, and which vendors are best equipped to work with our members and to, in general, work with public entities and with nonprofits in Massachusetts. And we also pre-negotiate pricing on behalf of our members. We're using our over 850 plus membership base to get the best pricing for our members. And we will help you discuss your site interests and connect the best suited of our approved vendors, depending on the ownership model that you're choosing. For this very exciting community charge program, which is funded through the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and we are very excited and grateful for them to supporting us to this, to bring EV charging stations to low and moderate income drivers. We have partnered with LISC Massachusetts and Green Energy Consumer Alliance. And with that, I will hand it over to Emily and Joe to quickly talk about LISC and to talk about your role within this program.
Thank you, Anna. This is Emily Jones with LISC Massachusetts. We are a national community development support organization, and so we support resilient and inclusive communities of opportunity through grants, technical assistance, loans, other resources. Here in Massachusetts, we're very focused on affordable housing, production and preservation, and specifically decarbonization, sustainability, and resiliency. So we're really excited to partner on the Community Charge Program to help ensure that our affordable housing partners, private, public, for-profit, nonprofit, statewide, are able to access electric vehicle charging stations. And we will help on some of the back-end support grants as well as outreach on this program. And I'll pass it over to Anna van der Speck.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna, and I'm the Electric Vehicle Program Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. For those of you who haven't heard of Green Energy Consumers, we are also a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. And basically our bread and butter is consumer education around clean energy technologies. So our role in this project is to work with site hosts during the installation process, but particularly after, to make sure that folks in the community know the stations are coming, know how to use them, know how to get an EV, and so that the asset basically that you're putting in the field actually gets used and actually gets used by the community that you, the site host, are serving. So that might be ride and drive events or EV showcases or workshops or pizza parties where we talk about charging. All of that is very customizable, but our job is really that community outreach piece as the stations are getting installed and after. And we're very excited to get started.
Emily and Anna, we are very excited to have this powerhouse of all the nonprofits assembled here to reach all our membership bases. And with that, before diving into EV charging basics, we have a first poll question for you, which is, which type of organization do you represent? And I will have Sharon launch the poll and then share the results in maybe one or 2 minutes. I'm not able to see the screen, so if someone could just read out loud the responses, that would be great.
Yes, majority, we have 9 entity, 4 nonprofit, 0 state agency, and 5 other organizations.
Thank you very much. This is very exciting too. It sounds like there's a wide variety of organizations that we have worked with and excited to work with in the future as well, covering different types of organizations. And with that, I will hand it over to Anna from Green Energy Consumers to talk a little bit about electric vehicle charging basics.
Thank you, Anna. So, excuse me. My job is to make sure that we are all using the same terms and using them correctly for the rest of this conversation. So I'm going to go over some basics of EVs, EV charging, and then the parts of the installation to think about as you're considering installing an EV charger. So the first thing to say is that when I say EV charger, and when most people say EV charger, we're referring to the device that you plug a vehicle into to charge it up. Technically speaking, that is actually called electric vehicle supply equipment, or EVSE. You might see that term in resources about EV charging or documents or technical documents about chargers. Technically speaking, the charger is actually a device that's built into the vehicle that is taking energy from an outside source and then putting it into the battery, but nobody talks like that. So we're going to use EV charger and EVSE interchangeably, but technically speaking, we're talking about EVSE. The job of EVSE is really to safely and efficiently transfer energy from your site to the vehicle. But there's a whole sort of ecosystem behind that that gets that energy to your site, to your vehicle, that it's worth talking through because the different incentives that are available cover different parts of that ecosystem. So if we start all the way on the left of this graphic, we're looking at infrastructure, electric grid infrastructure that is owned and maintained by the electric utility. In Massachusetts, that is either an investor-owned utility like National Grid, Eversource, or Unitil, or a municipally owned utility, or MLP. But in either case, the utility owns the distribution network, which is taking energy from the generators and delivering it to your neighborhood. So that's the poles and wires, the transformers, and basically everything up to your meter is owned and maintained by the electric utility. Then at your site, you've got electric infrastructure that you, the site host, owns and maintains. So that's the panel, and then any conductors bringing electricity from the panel to whatever your end use is. And then when we're talking about EV chargers, obviously that end use is EVSE, that then takes that energy and, again, safely and efficiently puts it into your vehicle's battery. When we talk about EVSE and for the purposes of Community Charge as a program, we're specifically talking about smart chargers. You might also hear of these referred to as networked chargers. These are basically chargers that are hooked up to the internet either through Wi-Fi or cell service. that allow you, the site host, or whoever is maintaining and operating this charging station, to remotely access it, see who's charging, when they're charging, how much power they're drawing, and it also enables you to charge for the electricity that you're dispensing. There are also what we affectionately refer to as dumb chargers out there, which don't have that Wi-Fi or cell service capability, that just deliver energy, but you can't log on to any portal to see how they're doing. Those still exist, but they're not supported through this community charge program. So we're going to exclusively be talking about smart chargers. With that, we can move to the next slide. There are a couple of different levels of EV charging and a couple of different port types. So there's 3 levels of charging specifically. The first one is called level 1 charging. It's when you plug your vehicle into a normal 120 volt outlet. It's called a trickle charge. It adds 4 miles of range power spent charging. It exists, but it is not a method of charging that is supported through the community charge program, but I just wanted to mention it in case you've heard of it. Community charge specifically supports level 2 and DC fast charging. So I'm on this slide, want to draw your attention to the bottom left, so we can explain the difference between level 2 and DC fast charging. So level 2 charging takes an input of 240 volts. However, if you drive an EV personally or know anybody who does, they might have a level 2 charging station in their garage or where they park. It's the same type of outlet that you'd need for an all-electric dryer or a washing machine or something like that. It delivers power somewhere between 6 and 19.2 kilowatts. And in terms of charging speed, you can add somewhere between 20 and 50 miles per hour spent charging. It's a range because it depends on the power output of the charger and also how much power the vehicle you're charging can actually accept. Level 2 charging is something you can install at home, but also there's plenty of level 2 charging out in public. It's a great solution for places where people are naturally parked for a while. While you're at the gym or the grocery store or something where you might be there for an hour or two, you can actually add some miles. And that's called opportunity charging, where you're plugging in a place that you happen to be already. DC fast charging is also sometimes called level 3. It's even more powerful. It's the fastest charging that we have. That requires 3-phase 480 volt power. The charging stations vary a lot in terms of their power output. The low end these days is around 50 kilowatts. The high end these days is 350 or more. As a result, the charging speed of DC fast charging varies a lot. It depends on the power output, again, of the charging station you're plugged into, what your vehicle can accept. It also matters how full your vehicle's battery already is. But the rule of thumb that we use is that in general, you can get from 10% full to 80% full in at least 30 minutes or in 30 minutes or less. A lot of the newer vehicles now can do 10 to 80% in 12 minutes or 15 minutes, but some of the older vehicles still need a half hour. So that's sort of our rule of thumb. And DC fast charging is really helpful if you need to charge quickly, particularly for road trips. You see a lot of these along highways at rest stops. These people tend to use less frequently, but are very important to have available, so that if you need to charge up quickly, you can. So community charge will support both level 2 and DC fast charging. I'm now going to talk about the different ports, because that gets a little complicated, but will get less complicated with time. So going through the bullet points, there's basically 3 ports that community charge will support, port types. J1772 is the port that is commonly used by non-Tesla vehicles for level 2 charging. In the graphic on the bottom right, it's the middle option. This has historically been used by everybody but Tesla, and we're now moving towards a new standard, but many vehicles still use the J1772 for level 2 charging. Then for DC fast charging, we've got the CCS combo. And this has historically been used by most non-Tesla vehicles for DC fast charging. If you look again at the graphic at the bottom right, it's the port on the far right. And if you look at it closely, you can see that it's actually just the J1772 port with 2 additional prongs underneath. So if you've ever driven a Chevy Bolt, for example, the CCS combo is the charging port used in that vehicle. However, increasingly, the market has settled on one standard to rule them all, and that's NACS, also known as the North American Charging Standard. This is used by Tesla and an increasing number of non-Tesla vehicles for level 1, level 2, and DC fast charging. So this is the standard that all the automakers are sort of landing on. So new non-Tesla vehicles, many of them are being built with this NACS port built in natively, but there are also adapters that are available for purchase by drivers, so you can switch between all of these standards with other standards. So if you have a vehicle that has a CCS port, but you want to be able to use a NACS station, you can purchase an adapter from your manufacturer. If you have a Tesla vehicle and you want to be able to use a J1772, you can purchase an adapter for that from Tesla. So right now it's not quite the Wild West, it's a slightly tamer Wild West, but we are moving as an industry, as a market, towards that NACS standard. So long story short, there's 3 levels of charging. Community Charge supports level 2 and DC fast charging. The ports that Community Charge supports are J1772, CCS combo, and NACS. But if you're installing several charging stations, you can install several different ports to make different ones available for different drivers. With that, I think we can move to the next slide. We're going to move on to talk about incentives now. I'm going to start with incentives from the state and then talk about incentives from the utility. What I want to stress before, during, and after this section is that the Community Charge team is here to help you figure out what your specific site qualifies for. So don't feel the need to write detailed notes on all of this and try and figure out for yourself whether you qualify or not. That's the glory of this program, is that that support exists for you. But with that said, Mass EVIP is the name of the incentive program run by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. It stands for Massachusetts Electric Vehicle Incentive Program, so handy acronym. It is available for level 2 units specifically in multifamily dwellings, workplaces and fleets, and at public access sites. For each one of those categories, there are eligibility requirements that we won't dive into today, but again, the Community Charge team can walk you through. There aren't any incentives available from the state for DC fast charging stations right now, but for those level 2 stations, Mass EVIP generally covers 60% of the costs, up to $50,000 per street address. For government-owned public access sites specifically, you might be eligible for up to 100% of those costs being covered. As Anna said, we'll share these slides later, so you can click on all the hyperlinks here if you want to learn more. But again, that's what the Community Charge team is for. If we go on to the next slide, we'll talk about utility incentives. So most of Massachusetts is served either by National Grid or Eversource, so that's what we're going to focus on in terms of incentives here today. Both utilities have programs that cover some or all of the costs of installing charging at multifamily homes, workplaces, for fleets, and public sites. In general, the structure of the program is that they cover up to 100% of the costs of needed infrastructure. So Sharon, if you don't mind clicking once, we'll have on the graphic at the bottom circled the parts that those utility programs cover. Or maybe it's not Sharon. Whoever's controlling the slides, please click once so that we can see the animation. There we go. So you might have heard of the term make-ready before. That is the term for programs that cover infrastructure upgrades that are needed to support an EV charging station. So in general, National Grid and Eversource in all of those segments cover 100% of those costs. And then depending on what kind of site host you are and where you're located, there may also be rebates for the actual hardware of the charger itself and any network fees that you might have during its operations. Which programs have funding is kind of a moving target because these are very popular programs at Eversource and National Grid. So in some buckets, the funds have been depleted for certain utilities, but not others. So the punchline here again is talk to the Community Charge team. We can tell you exactly what you're qualified for and what's still available. And then I do have to note that Unitil and many municipal light plants also have programs that are similarly structured between make-ready funds, and rebates for the actual EVSE. But again, community charge team is there to walk you through that. But between the utility and the state, there's usually funding available to help bring down the costs of installing your station. You can go to the next slide. This is my last slide to say this has been a kind of a quick run through some EVSE or EV charging basics and the incentives. But if you want to read about this, we have a procurement guide for EV charging that talks about the different types of EV charging, the different ports, the different incentives, the benefits of hosting EV charging, what you need to know if you're going to operate the site yourself or work with a third-party operator. All of that is in that guide. The link is there, and we'll send it out after the webinar. But with that, I think I turn it back to Anna.
Great, thank you very much. And with that, we're going to launch our next poll question, which is, what is your primary concern when considering EV charging installations? And while you all are responding, I also want to mention that we do have a landing page for our program, and maybe someone else from the programs team can put the link in the chat. And on that landing page, there's a link to our previous webinar and also the link to our procurement guide. And I also want to mention that I know the incentives can be very overwhelming and there are a lot of moving pieces, but later on you're going to hear from E3 as well. They're very well versed in what's currently available and how much a certain host could get. So if you have any specific questions, we're happy to answer them later as well. Fair, do you want to share the results from the poll?
Sure. So 10 people said cost, 0 said limited space, 4 said lack of funding, and 6 said not sure where to begin.
Okay, thank you all very much for responding. And that's why we're here, to trying to help you to figure out where to get started. And regarding the costs, also to help you figure out what type of incentives you're eligible for, and especially if you're a nonprofit or public entity, how much can be covered. In some cases that can go up to 100%, but it depends on different factors that we would need to look into in more detail. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Fair to talk about the community charge program.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, so shifting gears a bit and talking about what everybody's here for, community charge. So what is community charge? Community charge was created with the intention to bring EV charging access to low to moderate income drivers, so people who often don't have the option of charging at home. We're focused mainly on low to moderate income housing in locations in or serving/adjacent environmental justice communities, which are areas that are already facing disproportionate environmental and social burdens. And how the program really operates is Power Options Leverage is the buying power of our 800 plus consortium. And using this, we ran a competitive procurement to get strong pricing on equipment and installation for Power Options members and hosts of community charge to benefit from. There's also potential subsidization from Mass EC through the Act for All 2 grant, and that funding could cover host administrative time, community outreach and engagement support, project implementation. So it's not just about getting this hardware in the ground, it's making the whole process work for you and making it as easy as possible. Next slide, please. Part of what really makes community charge unique is community charge's community and education and outreach aspect, and this is meant to spread awareness about the EV charging stations and EVs in general to get people excited. So our team is ready to support you with both physical and digital outreach materials, which can be translated as needed for your community. And we'll work with you closely to come up with tailored approaches to get the community engaged, whether it is social media campaigns, in-person events, webinars. The goal is really to make sure that the people these stations are meant to serve actually know that they're there and feel welcome using them and anticipate their arrival and get excited. Next slide, please. And we know that everybody has different experience with EV charging and wants different levels of control over them. So Community Charge offers 3 different procurement pathways. The first is our vendor-owned and operated model, also coined as VOOM, who we have E3 here to talk about more later on in this webinar. This is a hands-off approach where the stations sit on your property, but a third-party program provider installs, owns, operates, and maintains them. So they cover the hardware, software, installation, electricity, and you as the host can earn revenue through a profit share agreement based on station usage. It's the lightest lift for the host. So really just a big hands-off approach. The second is a host-owned approach. It's hands-on where you procure and finance the stations yourself, either through an a la carte model selecting different hardware, software, installation services, or through a turnkey vendor where they do all the busy work and then flip it on, and then you take over from there. You set the rates, manage the software, keep all the revenue, but you're also responsible for that maintenance, ongoing operations, and handling any issues that arise. But this does give you the most control out of the 3 options. Finally is a hybrid model that kind of combines this VOOM model and host-owned approach, where you own the stations, but you would enter into operations and maintenance agreement with the third-party provider. In this case, it would be E3, and they handle the day-to-day, so software, general upkeep, troubleshooting issues, while you maintain ownership and control. It's a middle ground that pairs, your oversight and control of the station with vendor expertise in handling the day-to-day issues. Next slide. In terms of where these stations can go, we have 4 example use cases. The first is publicly accessible sites that need to be available to the general public around the clock, which prioritizes EJCs, though a minimum of 12 hours per day works if full-time access isn't feasible at your location. Second is workplaces with at least 15 employees, and they can participate as long as they offer community access outside of business hours. Third is multi-unit dwelling spaces with 5 or more units. Those are eligible. And then finally, educational campuses with at least 15 students can host stations through Community Charge as long as community access outside of school hours happens when possible. To be eligible for Community Charge, you must be a nonprofit or public entity. You must own or control the site. So if you are in a lease situation, but you still have control over where the stations would be, that totally works. And you must serve priority populations, so low to moderate income residents who rely on personal vehicles but don't have home charging. And these stations need to be operational by July 2027 per our agreement with Mass CEC. It's important to note that spots under the Community Charge program are limited because Mass CEC funding for outreach and charger subsidization has a cap. But if you're not eligible or not selected for Community Charge because the program is filled up, the broader Power Options EV charging program can still serve you. And that also includes non-public facing use cases like fleet charging for public entities and nonprofits. And we will continue to help identify available incentives to bring costs down for these projects as well. And regardless of which path you take, whether it's through the Community Charge program or the Power Options General EV charging program, working with Power Options means you get competitive pre-negotiated pricing, quality equipment, reputable developers, optimized incentives, and just expertise advising throughout the process and a support system. And with that, I'll hand it over to Anna.
Very much. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our process. So first, we would like to encourage you to reach out to one of our Power Options employees or to our general email, communitycharge@poweroptions.org. And then we will schedule an introductory meeting about 30 minutes with you to understand more about your needs and about potential locations that might serve for EV charging stations. And then internally as a programs team, we will reconvene and we will prioritize and vet all the different sites and look into the different locations that you have. Then we will send you a non-binding letter of intent just for us to move forward, but there's no commitment to move forward or not, just for us to know that you're interested and to reserve your spot in the program. And then we will assess the potential site hosts together with our vendors. So we will have another meeting where we will introduce you to one of our vendors, depending on which model you pick, the VOO model, vendor-owned and operated, host-owned, or hybrid. And then they will either do a remote visit or do an in-person site visit to look at your transformers, electrical infrastructure to see what's possible. And then you would enter into a participation agreement with the program provider. And that is an agreement that we are currently pre-negotiating with our vendors to make this process very smooth for you. I also want to mention here that we are operating under an enabling statute. So as a public entity, you do not have to run your own RFP if you go through the Power Options program. So this also eliminates like legal costs and so on as we're pre-negotiating pricing and terms with the program providers. And then we will move to EVSE deployment, which is either can be level 2 charging stations or potentially, if possible, DCFC. That depends on the cost and utility incentives. And our provider will also, like we already mentioned, identify all the incentives, and they will prepare and help you submit all these incentive applications. And then we will move to ongoing community outreach, where, as we mentioned, we want to work with you to tailor this to your community, to support with outreach, translated materials, pizza parties, webinars, and so on, whatever makes most sense. And with that, I'm very, very excited to introduce you to E3. E3 Energy Advisors is a veteran-owned business, and we have selected them as part of our competitive RFP process. And we are very excited to have them. For us, it's very important to work with diverse contractors throughout our programming. And E3 Energy Advisors, they have a lot of experience in this space. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Kevin and Peter, to introduce EG Energy Advisors. And then after that, we will move into a few questions that I have for you. Over to you, Kevin and Peter.
Thanks, Anna. Appreciate it. Happy to be here. My name is Peter Schmidt. I'm the president and CEO of E3 Energy, and we're an energy services company that specializes in turnkey EV charging station installation. And our expertise has come in the incentive stacking and rebate side of things. So between our knowledge there and this program, I think we're able to provide a pretty great product that I'm sure that a lot of people will be interested to learn more about. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin, who's our Director of EV Charging Stations and Electrification.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So yeah, as Peter noted, Kevin Clark with E3. I am primarily the contact for most organizations for reviewing the site potential and needs for EV charging, and then identifying best path forward for incentives and coming to a desired solution.
Awesome. Thank you both very much. Here on the slide, we have a few questions. So one question, so these questions are based on frequently asked questions that we have received, and we thought it's great to hear from you directly. So the first question is, what does the host need to provide when working with E3?
You know, in general, it's going to come down to a plan of some sort, what the desired outcome that they're looking for is, whether it be level 2, level 3, or the needs of the site. Some customers that we're working with today have needs to meet stretch code requirements for new construction. Others are looking to bring in the amenity of EV charging, and we need to identify how many spaces they're willing to allocate toward EV and build out a plan for not just today, but also for future of the property.
Great, thank you so much. And I also want to mention here that we will work with each host individually, because every host is very different and has different needs. So we will help you figure out these steps, because we know a lot of the members and a lot of the organizations that we are working with, you have so many other things going on. So we don't expect you to become an EV charging expert, but we'll help you through the whole process. And the second question here is, what are the expectations for the host under the vendor-owned model?
Great question. I guess the expectations for the host would be to participate in a format that they're comfortable with, whether that be from a space requirement or a space allocation for EV parking, or from a financial participation if they so choose, or if they want to be 100% hands-off. As Anna noted, each of these are unique. We refer to the snowflake model, that every site is its own snowflake, and every site host comes into that model as well.
Thank you. And then the third question is, what are the risks to the host under the vendor-owned model, or maybe here kind of comparing the host-owned versus vendor-owned model, and any associated risks?
Yeah, so with the host-owned model, there are no risks that we can come up with, quite honestly. The usage of the station, the electricity cost, the software cost, all of that falls back to E3. Or whoever the host is, I should say, in this case, E3. If you choose to be the host of a EV charging station, you have the operation maintenance that we pick up under the vendor-owned, in addition to the software cost. It can be a financial drain. And what we're finding is that many organizations around the state that host their own stations don't fully acknowledge what the financial exposure is, along with the maintenance. We're finding that some organizations are spending as much as 4 hours a year per port, per station, to troubleshoot and manage from a maintenance perspective. And then many are charging for the electricity without fully realizing what their true costs are to deliver that electricity to the vehicle. These are all things that we take on under the vendor-owned model at E3, and the site host doesn't have to worry about any of that.
Thank you, Kevin. And so as part of the vendor-owned model, we talk about profit sharing, where the host might get some profit through kind of how the profit is driven through the charging stations. And I do want to mention here that this is more of an amenity that our hosts are offering to the residents, to employees, to visitors. So this isn't kind of a big like moneymaker, especially the next maybe next like 3 to 5 years. And then while we see an increase in EV charging uptake and purchases of EVs, I think this could grow over the years. But I would be curious to hear from you, Kevin, about your experiences with profit sharing and how it works.
Well, we're all going to get rich off of this.
Yes.
There's just an incredible amount of money when you're selling a kilowatt hour of electricity that you can make. In all seriousness, the amenity perspective and providing the access to electricity for EVs at a rate that EV drivers are willing to pay does not today allow for a tremendous amount of revenue or profit from that perspective. There is a minimal amount there. And again, site by site, we would review it. Typically, we're looking to get the site to a break even against software and transaction fees and electricity costs, and providing that amenity and allowing the site host to market themselves, whether it be from an ESG perspective or from a resident perspective or a member perspective, that they have it on site to leverage either opportunity charging or, as we fully aware in the industry, 80% of charging is done at home. So we're trying to solve that access issue and work through the revenue to make sure that it is utilized.
And then how do you determine the charging rates or the cost per kilowatt hour? I think what some questions we've heard is, oh, what if E3 is going to charge 50 cents per kilowatt hour, but the neighbor charges 30 cents. There's no profit driven to our station. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about how you would come up with the cost per kilowatt hour. And I also want to mention here that we are working with the host as well to make this affordable and accessible for your residents, obviously. Yeah, over to you, Kevin.
So aside from picking a number out of thin air, we are going to work through the actual costs on the site, which would consist of both all electricity costs, transaction fees, and software costs, and projected kilowatt hour usage or utilization rates that the site is expecting. Our goal is similar, aligned with the site host in that we want the stations utilized. So to put out the stations at an excessively high electricity rate isn't in our best interest if they never get used. That just has an asset sitting there, wasting our time, effort, and money. We want to be competitive in the market. We understand where the rates are. I've been driving an EV myself for 5 years. I know about what I'd be willing to pay and where the breaks are for a level 2 charger, especially. That all comes into the conversation. And quite honestly, there's a secondary conversation that happens behind here as well, where the site host may, through the transparency of working with a vendor-owned model, be willing to subsidize the electric rate. There's many variations to this. It takes a conversation and it takes input from the site host to get to where we want to be. And we're fully aware of that, and we'll work each site individually based on the electricity costs that we're looking at.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Peter. Kevin and Peter are gonna stay on while we're launching the next full break. We have one last question, I promise. And the question is, which procurement model do you prefer? And while we're waiting, feel free to start typing any questions in the chat. We have E3 here. They're staying with us throughout the questions as well. So if you have any technical questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well. There are no stupid questions. Just ask, any questions that you have. Can someone share the responses with me?
Yes. The poll is not closed yet, but I will share. We have 5 host-owned, 6 vendor-owned, and 6 hybrid. So a good spread.
Okay, that's very equal. Thank you. That's very interesting. And I know there, especially for organizations that already have EV charging, they most likely want to stick to the host-owned, and others that might not have as much experience yet or want to do more of a hands-off approach, want to do vendor-owned. Quickly, we're going to talk about how to get started. So on this slide, we have a QR code. You can scan that to reach out to us. We also just want to emphasize here again that this program will run through July 2027, but the sooner you reach out to us, the better, because some of those grant applications, incentive applications do take a while. So please reach out to us as soon as you can. You can send us an email to communitycharge@poweroptions. And here we also have the link to our website. And after this webinar, as we mentioned, we will be sending out the recording and the slide deck as well. So thank you all very much. And with that, we're gonna dive into Q&A, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can answer any questions. Okay, we have a few questions here. Let me see. Okay, we have one question that says from Chris, what can a municipality in the Eversource territory offer to assist their residents to encourage adoption of EVs? In particular, what support for new jointly developed clustered housing and public buildings, for example, Southampton, Massachusetts? So I'm not sure if this is related to kind of okay, I think you're asking about kind of like community outreach and resources. So I'm gonna try to answer, otherwise please like respond in here as well. So what can a municipality and Eversource offer to assist the residents? I can get started, and then maybe Anna, I can turn it over to you to talk a little bit about community outreach as well and your experiences. So how to encourage adoption of EVs? I think what we've seen, particular with sedans and like light duty vehicles, is that they're at cost parity and are already below the cost of a comparative ICE vehicle. So I think this is always a good argument to make, that the cost of adoption is lower than for a traditional diesel vehicle, especially now with all the gas prices being very, very high. I think it just becomes like self-explanatory. But also I think what helps is to spread the word and to share different resources. And I know that Green Energy Consumers, they have a lot of resources. The MassDC website has a lot of resources. And then also Community Charge, we're also trying to educate through different opportunities and to different webinars to support the adoption. Anna, is there anything you want to add to the question?
I'll just say that there is a lot of misinformation and confusion about electric vehicles that's out there. And so I know anytime you talk about outreach and education, people talk about meeting people where they are, but our goal with this project is to really customize outreach. So in one community, the best thing might be to have a booth at Town Day and have a bunch of EVs there with a poster that says, do you know that you can charge these at this new location? And in another place, it might be best to have, as I said before, a pizza party for residents of a new multi-unit dwelling and just have free food and answer people's questions about the new station. So there's no one size fits all. I feel like I'm going through all the idioms and metaphors here, but really doing that proactive outreach rather than assuming that people will Google if they have a question, because I think a lot of people I'll just assume that electric vehicle means expensive, means not for me, and that's not true the way it was maybe true 10 years ago. And so we have to do that proactive outreach to help people think that maybe this is even in the realm of possibility for them to make the switch.
Thank you very much. Yes, Chris, feel free to reach out directly to us if you have any additional questions. Second question from Shelley for Kevin and Peter. The question is, under VOOM, what is the minimum length of the contract? What happens to EVSE equipment at the end of the contract term? Are vendors able to install different brand EVs and networks, or only go one brand? So I think these are like a few different questions. So maybe let's start with the first one. What is the minimum length of the contract? And bake into that, what happens to the equipment at the end of the contract term?
Yeah, so usually the program term is going to be 4 or 5 years. Typically, we're using incentives to help fund the program. So we usually line that up to parallel the end of any program requirements. At the end of the term, because E3 will be owning the equipment, usually the hardware is removed from the site if there isn't an extension or a decision to keep the location up and running and operational. And third question was?
Third question was, are vendors able to install different brand EVSE and networks, or only one brand?
So yeah, we one of the things that E3 does is we're agnostic to the hardware and the software. While we do have our preferred options, we only use truly open charge point protocol hardware and software. Meaning, if you don't like the hardware or the software, we can always come in and swap those out. So we stay away from the vertically integrated operators, if you will. But that's the idea, is we have the ability and the flexibility to offer multiple manufacturers and network service providers.
Thank you. And then next question from Gabriella. Can you clarify program eligibility for municipalities? So yes, municipalities are eligible to participate in our program. Ideally, you are serving or are adjacent to an environmental justice community, or you have any like buildings that serve low or moderate income drivers, for example, multi-unit dwelling buildings, or any affordable housing. But feel free to reach out to us directly so we can take a look at your sites and confirm. But as a municipality, you are eligible to participate. Okay, moving to the next question, and apologies, this is my first time using GoTo, so I'm still trying to like navigate this software. And Andre is asking, I would like to know, do you already have sites to look at? So the sites depend on the host. So if you have certain sites in mind, then you can reach out to us and we are happy to take a look at them. Or kind of like once you reach out to us, then we will talk to you. I think this answers your question. Otherwise, we're already talking to some different organizations across. I think you're located in Boston, so we are already looking into some different locations in Boston, but feel free to reach out to us so we can take a look and see if you have any sites where you're the host as well. Okay, next question from Lamar. Hi, Lamar. How much does site accessibility change the cost of the project? For example, publicly accessible versus private. Maybe Kevin, Peter, this is a question you could take. So what are the hurdles that you see with site accessibility, and how does it change the project cost? So maybe we can kind of talk a little bit about if it's publicly accessible or if it's only accessible to employees or to residents.
Certainly. So if it's a gated site, meaning there's no access without a key card or something like that, the funding at this point in time is going to be pretty well limited. There could be an avenue or two to pursue. Public access, the definition of public access isn't necessarily 24/7. It could be 12 hours a day. It's really a matter of access to the site. And for what it's worth, multifamily dwelling has its own kind of side category. So don't just assume that because it's a multifamily site that you're not eligible because it's gated. It falls under its own criteria. So again, it's well worth a conversation to look at it. We've come up with different scenarios where sometimes a town operates a site on a parking area. They've got full right access and we're able to get funding. Another situation could be a gated area, but there's access on the weekend, something like that. It's definitely worth a conversation.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Barry. Are all charging stations installed under this program expected to be metered separately from the buildings where they are sited? If some might be tied into a building's existing electrical panel, municipalities designated as green communities would need to track the electricity usage associated with EV charging separately from the rest of the building's use. Would this data be shared with the host under the vendor-owned model? Before I turn it over to you, Kevin and Peter, so I think they can either be separately metered or tied into your existing infrastructure. It kind of depends on the setup, I believe, of your site. And then we had actually this discussion before where if the software and so on lives with E3, there will be a way that we might be able to share the data with you. But I'll let you, Kevin and Peter, respond in more detail.
Yeah. Absolutely. We're going to look for the most logical solution, whether it be behind the existing service if there's load or new service. Many cases going behind an existing service is going to be less expensive and more logical, but on the same hand, it may be restrictive from a potential electrical load perspective. Regardless of how we accomplish the goal, if there's a need to remit electricity costs back to the host or provide any data back, we will review that as each needed. remitting the electricity back is typically done on a quarterly basis, and those numbers would be set so that the host would be made whole or made whole to an agreed structure.
Okay, thank you very much. The question from Strat is, what's your experience with college campuses? So I think at Power Options, a lot of our members are college campuses across Massachusetts and across the Northeast. So we're helping them with everything energy related. We have already installed charging stations through our previous round at some of those sites. But I'll also turn it over to you and Kevin if you have any experience with college campuses.
Yeah, we do. We've looked at a bunch of different sites, both in Massachusetts and other areas for EV charging on campus. And really comes down to serving the not just the students that might be on property, but also the employees, the professors, teachers, what have you. As more and more people adopt EVs, they're looking for places to charge. And when the vehicles are sitting for 6-8 hours, it's a logical solution. We find that these sites are easy to manage because most are structured in such a way to get access, and many have accessible electricity. So they are absolutely desirable. And we will work through to find what the right solution should be.
Thank you. And a related question also from Strat is if you have any experience with church properties. Also at Power Options, we do have experience with church properties, but also turn it over back to you, Kevin.
Yeah, we've looked at a few organizations like that. I think it comes down to the use case, meaning how often they're going to get used, whether they're in a convenient environment and open to non-members utilizing it. At the end of the day, EV charging is all about utilization. We want the stations to be in a location where they're known and they are convenient for use. And if that makes sense, then that makes sense.
Yes. Strat, feel free to reach out to us so we can take a look at the locations. And then I know we're almost at time, so I'm going to try to go quickly through them. Gabby, you have had another question. If we have old chargers we're looking to replace, update, how would that hypothetically be integrated into program participation implementation? I'm going to answer that real quick. We are not able to subsidize that through additional funding from Mass CC, especially if it doesn't serve low or moderate income drivers, but we have a lot of experience with rip and replace, especially with NLX charging stations. And I think we have been in touch, so please reach back out to us. Kevin, Peter, and the Power Options team are currently working through some other rip and replace programs as well. So please reach out to us and we can support you under the general Power Options program. One question from Andre, to be sure, can we get funding from a backup generator to charging station? I don't think that's not covered through community charge. I'm not sure, Kevin, Peter, if that would be covered by any of the utilities or incentive programs.
I guess it would be a true separate backup generator with a different power source, or are you talking about vehicle to grid from the EV car into the building?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Andre, maybe you can clarify or send us an email so we can reach back out to you. One question is also to Peter. Do you have AI chargers? I'm not sure if that's a typo. It's like a capital A and then space lowercase I.
Kevin, unless you've heard of it, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to the conclusion that that's more software related, and our software partners are absolutely running algorithms to best manage the site, including load managing. That's where I would go with that question. I'm not familiar with a hardware provider, A space I.
Okay. Perfect. So AI. Great. One last question we have. Do users of EVSE need credit cards to use the EVSE? Will EVSE users need to sign up for different charging platforms, for example, EVgo, ChargePoint, Autel, Blink, etc.?
There is a software component to collect revenue, not revenue, but to collect the cost of the charging station or the electricity from the driver. Absolutely, there would be a software platform for that. A lot of software platforms today will go out via Google Pay or Apple Pay and eliminate the need for a software solution. But we always recommend utilizing the native software solution. We get best results, and it allows us the best controls for load management and what have you. But there is a solution to go through that, so to speak.
Thank you. And then I see, David, you have your hand up. I'm not sure if there's a way for us to unmute you if you still have a question. Okay, I can ask you to unmute.
Okay.
Hi, David.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, there are three modes, host-based, host-owned, hybrid, and site-owned. Now, if one starts, we would have not much experience in any of the three. Is there a way, after a few months or something like that, gain experience and realize a preference for one of those three based on how things are going, that you could switch from one to the other based on what you're running into?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't have a lot of experience, we usually recommend going with E3 through the vendor-owned and operated model, just because it's hands-off and you don't have to spend much time learning about the software, maintenance, all that. And then I'll turn it over to you, Kevin and Peter, to talk about if there's a way to transition from vendor-owned to host-owned.
Yeah, there is, and ideally, we have those conversations prior to, moving forward with any sort of project. And the big piece that we're also doing is we're hopefully simplifying the operation component of it in general. And just for quick reference, we're working with a municipality that right now they spend about 100 to 120 hours a year troubleshooting their charging stations, which is a ridiculous number. That's the big lift that we're taking off. So, again, we're trying to present an overall simplified approach to EV charging. And so that's what's worth the conversation. And we look at what the potential incentives are. It's really, it comes down to the conversation at the time of what makes the most sense. But in any event, we certainly aren't going to convince anybody into owning their own hardware and software just to leave them, high and dry. So, with that being said, we're going to be around for the term of the agreement to offer our support.
Okay, awesome. Also, Andre clarified the question regarding the chargers. The question is AI as in chargers that are autonomous. So what I've seen is that there are robot chargers, which are like robot arms, or if you have a large fleet, there are robots that can just like charge your fleet. I think this probably only makes sense if you have a large fleet. It's also very cost intensive, as all these, it's still very much evolving, and I don't think it's ready for like broad market introduction yet. But maybe Kevin, Peter, you have anything to add here?
No, I think you hit it right there. I guess we can, again, we take everything by case. We work with small businesses, municipalities. We work with a couple of the transit authorities here. So regardless of what the need is, we're here to help assess it and find the ideal solution. Just keeping in mind, it's going to always be Open Charge Point Protocol compliant.
Awesome. I think that concludes all the questions. Just trying to go through the chat, see if there's anything else. Perfect. Okay, I think we answered all the questions. Thank you all so much for joining. We really, really appreciate it. We appreciate all your questions. We all are learning a lot from them. Feel free to reach out to us at communitycharge@poweroptions.org. You will also receive an email from Power Options with the slide deck and the recording. Thank you so much to our partners, LISC Massachusetts, Green Energy Consumers and to Mass CC for sponsoring this program. And also thank you very much, Kevin and Peter from E3 for joining us, and also to Sharon, who was in the background and making sure everything is working out with the technicalities. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we're looking forward to hear from you very soon, hopefully. Bye, everyone.